Hey, almost missed the mark. Whew. How are you doing this evening? Great? Is it me? Serious question. Have you noticed that customer service in the past few years has gotten so bad that it has become accepted practice to be, like, even if you spend a lot of money at a place, to be treated like poo? It's just, people get away with stuff now that they would have fired me 100 times over for. Have you noticed that? You know, by the way, I've asked a lot of people over time about central bank digital currency and how evil it is, and they all shrug and ask, well, what am I going to do about it? It's just, everybody feels so helpless. I can understand in certain parts of the world where you are literally a peasant. You know, everything you do or don't do is at the whim of the government. It's absolutely unbelievable. Since I read every comment, kind of a heartwarming story I heard from one guy's father who was dying, and some of the final words to his son was to the effect that he's sorry the way he not that he lived a bad life or anything like that, he just wasn't awake earlier on in life. He said that we're living on a human farm. And I think he said that his father repeated that several times before passing away. He says, we're living on a farm for humans, and this is really extremely, of course, I've thought that in different words for an extremely long time, well before this global reset scam has been going on. There's a lot of speculation whether it's true or not. I don't know, but it seems to be logical that certain aspects of crypto, specifically Bitcoin, might have been created by the government to get the peasants to get used to and fascinated by the use of the exchange of what I refer to as digital farts. And, you know, all these people keep telling me how great it is to invest in Bitcoin and crypto, and this video is not about that. But not a one of them, even though I said this a billion times, has been able to refute the fact that you have four important things that they keep forgetting. You need electricity for it to work, you need the internet for it to work, you need a network for it to work, and you need a significant number of suckers to believe in it for it to work. And that, you know, 3 strikes you're out, that's 4 strikes right there. There's not a single person, every person that keeps saying how wonderful crypto is, it's just repeating KoolAid said by some other crypto KoolAid spouter. I don't know if you know this or not, there's an app, and I was looking at the app. I didn't download it onto my phone, but they have an online version of it. You could track where every bit of Bitcoin came from, and you know it passed through this gate and this check. What sort of illegal substances are people consuming to think, since it's an undeniable hardcore 100% fact that the government can track every little hook and loop that Bitcoin passes through, that is somehow safe or untraceable, or I'm sorry, I'm never going to buy into, because it's nonsense. And the richest, most, and I don't even pretend to be one. I'm both not rich, and I am nothing even close, you know, to an expert on money. I'm not even pretending to do that in this video. They've all said, you know, that's just an absolute joke. It's just a joke. Some of them even have a percentage or two of their portfolio into crypto, but they will still flat out confess it's a joke. I'm sorry, you're never going to convince me that digital farts are something that should be invested into, especially since the government can track every single bit of it at all times. We have a serious money hoax problem here, and I don't spend my days thinking about money. I think a lot of people do. They either think about like hot chicks, or they think about money and or hot chicks and money. I don't spend any of my time thinking about that stuff. but I love to be standing on my, my hind legs looking out like a meerkat, those cats that stand up in the desert and are looking out in the far distant horizon about what's going on. Um, the government and most Western society is looking to make a replacement for money, so we have a serious money hoax problem. Also, I've been told by a lot of people over various parts, including Finland, Washington State, Oregon State, Alaska. I've heard from a lot of different people that say there's an enormous movement of military hardware across the globe. I don't know if you can help me confirm that or not. Also, too, several people have reported to me, including one website that I will leave unnamed, but I've been reading it now for, me and my buddy have been reading it now for, 25 plus years. It has a suspended. There are several websites that disseminate accurate, non-tinfoil hat, rational bits of information that certain individuals and entities out there do not want to get out. And now that website is suspended, and it has been for over a week. Here's some important points, and I wanted to make a quick conclusion. And I read every comment, and I'd like to hear from you on this. But I've squeezed my brain looking at stuff because I really don't care about this stuff, except I'm interested in knowing what's going on so that I can prepare for what's over the horizon. And by goodness, I am prepared. I have been for many, many, many years, and much of my life directed my thoughts towards that. The Fed has injected $5 trillion of deposits into a $13 trillion banking system that's had a whole lot to do with this crisis and fake scam that's been going on recently. I don't know what percentage of Americans, but I think it's incredibly low, know a single flipping thing about Fed Now Coin. It's the federal government's own version of the CBDC. And how can they collapse the banking system? I've looked at a lot of highly credible entities and taken in their information, and as long as they provide logical, rational, empirical facts, and they actually have it, and it's quite frightening actually. And I use that word frightening, very, very sparingly. They've created a crisis in the banking system. Right now there's 12.8% of banks. This based on 142-point criterion of banks that are examined by these sites that examine banks, their liquidity, their assets, their liabilities, their solvency, on and on and on and on. 12.8% of banks that are in the danger zone based on 142-point criteria. That's extremely high. 42% of banks are in the red zone. They're also too in danger, just not extreme danger like the 12.8%. So Fed Now Coin, how are they going to kickstart the Great Reset and get us flipped into digital currency? And then at the end of this, we all have to ask ourselves a question. And I don't think many of us have asked that question of ourselves, even though I have. How are they going to create a crisis in the banking system? Because we have a two-tiered system of banking of the Fed and commercial banks. How can they eliminate the second tier so that the Fed can implement digital coin? Because the only way out of this, there's only two ways out of the current crisis: the BRICS going off the US dollar, massive inflation, printing, just unending printing of the money machine. And they're not actually printing it literally, they're just spontaneously manifesting it out of thin air like Harry Potter magic, which is what the Fed does. The only way out of that is war and central bank digital currency, or a combination of both. Those are the only two ways out of this. That's not my opinion, that's a fact. Right now, a lot of banks are floating on serious insolvency, yet they're still alive, but on life support. Pandemic quantitative easing, or what they call QE, these rich people's banks that have been failing recently. And by the way, right now there is a rally. We had a huge dip and then a rally, and this is the same thing that happened in 2000, 2008, and one other time period, I forget which, where everything's, oh, things are getting better, we're recovering. This is what people are saying during the rally, which looks really good. But right after that rally, anybody with two eyes can see things are about to fall off the cliff. That's not like a doom speech. It's following the same pattern of 2008, except a lot more drastic. So we're about to fall off the cliff here. I wish that weren't the case, but the best experts on this stuff, and like I said, I don't pretend to be one, have said that that's exactly where it's going. These rich people's banks are failing. The deposits aren't big enough to take down the banks, but 10, 20, and $100 million bank deposits got created out of thin air when the Fed bought 10, 20, and $100 million bonds from bank customers. 10 depositors, and you only covered up to $250,000. 10 depositors had $13 billion of deposits in, for example, Silicon Valley Bank, earning less than treasuries. I mean, way, 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 way less. One person has accurately, and I believe him completely, argued that this is the Fed's injection. They've actually pumped up balloons into a lot of these top banks, and a lot more of them are going to topple like dominoes. And why would the Fed and the government and the Great Reset folks, what I call Hydra, even though that's not their name, they're essentially Hydra. They're an evil cabal trying to take everything down and install neo-totalitarian rule over everybody. No different than the coal mines, printed out fake money that you could only spend at the coal mine for like food and lodging. It's exactly the same thing. It's just same poo, different wrapper. Who would actually have 10 depositors with $13 billion? They only covered up to $250,000, and these people have billions in there, earning infinitely less interest than a treasury. No person in their right mind would do that. Absolutely nobody, even the dumbest person, wouldn't do that. It's totally at risk. $42 billion left Central Valley Bank in 6 hours. $42 billion. If you pump a big enough balloon into a bank, it doesn't matter how many creditors or regular depositors you have, you can pop the bubble and completely destroy the bank. You could reset the bank. All you have to do is put a big enough bubble in the bank. Who can put enormous, gigantic bubbles of money in a bank? Wouldn't that be the same entity that can spontaneously, like Harry Potter magic, manifest trillions and trillions of dollars out of thin air? Wouldn't that be the Fed? Why would they do that? Why would they want to collapse the second tier of a two-tier banking system? We have the Fed and we have commercial banks. Why would you want to collapse the second tier? Would that give you total totalitarian control over everything? That's a rhetorical question. When the Fed made commercial asset purchases, it went right into these commercial banks. That's been proven by a bunch of enormous, boring graphs that I stared at for hours and hours from multiple people, and they have the proof. Everything lines up. When the Fed did quantitative easing, they pumped in enormous amounts of money into these commercial banks. The Fed is setting up its own balloon, technically balloons, into these banks, which itself will pop at the right moment to funnel everybody into CBDC. You collapse the second tier of the banking system, you have total totalitarian control over the flow of money. The only thing you could do in that instance, when everybody's at crisis, we'll give you X amount of Fed coin, digital currency, for X amount of dollars that you have. Everything will be safe. Oh, like I thought I lost all my money. Yeah, you're protected. Fed's going to take care of you now. That's the exact same way people that deal in, not that I have first-hand experience, deal in narcotics, is that you give a person a free sample, and once they get hooked, then you take them for a ride in more ways than one. Since the pandemic, use air quotes here, the Fed has put trillions of dollars into bank deposits, printed endless trillions of dollars to be reserved, caused huge inflation, generated huge bank deposits, and is now leaving the banks, causing these banks to fold. CBDC is going to be created to delete the money out of our accounts, but the only way the CBDC from the Fed and these various other governments around the world can do that is by destroying the commercial, business, and personal tier of the banking system. You don't have to collapse them all. Like, oh, well, they're never going to collapse my credit union. I know everybody that works there, my family. You don't have to take care of it all. You only have to destroy a certain percentage of it, and they have to be the most vital, because all the other dominoes will fall. I mean, you don't have to push all the dominoes down, you just need to flick a few of the big dominoes. You don't need to fell all the dominoes, you just need to fell most of them. This has all been plotted out via supercomputer probably years and years and years ago. Is that speculation on my part? It certainly is. So the government is working to destroy. I mean, they spent so many hours looking at this boring, boring, boring stuff. They're working to destroy the commercial banking system, banking tier, through CBDC and injection of these balloons. Only have to be big enough to pop and destroy the bank, to bring them to insolvency, because a lot of these banks are teetering. 42% of banks are in the red zone. They don't need to focus on all the banks and all the credit unions. Just say the 42%. If you stick in a sufficient sized balloon from an entity who itself spontaneously generates money out of thin air, all you have to do is just pop those balloons on the banks that are teetering. Let's see here. This is the empirical fact based on 142-point criteria. 42% of banks are in the red zone and teetering. So that's less than half. We have to question ourselves, if in the near future our savings, my savings, your savings were to become meaningless. Not that anybody should move, do drastic things and move everything they've been saved up their whole life for, and I don't tell anybody what to do with what they've saved. What would you do if you knew for absolute certainty, or like 99% certainty, and it is 100% certainty, that all that money you've been saving would become meaningless and then under government control and underneath a central bank digital currency, which is totally controllable? What would you do with a certain percentage of that? Nobody needs money. They need money. They need the important things that they purchase with money. Entertainment things, medicine, gold, silver. Gold, silver is just another form of money. But it's always been a form of money since the dawn of time. The governments can't print it. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have been asking myself that question for years and learning more and more about CBDC. I learned way too much about CBDC in the past, several days. More than I like. A lot of really, really boring stuff. I was like, how are they going to do it? That was really a question in the back of my mind. How are they going to accomplish it? After enormous amounts of looking at all this boring information, I unfortunately, I never say unfortunately about learning things. I unfortunately now know how they're going to do it, and it makes perfect sense. Destroy, collapse the commercial banking tier, also too the individual banking tier. That's all you need. It's elimination of the last roadblock. It's kind of like the last code that needs to be cracked before you can access the supercomputer. You just need to drop that final firewall. In this case, it's not a literal firewall, but well, how can we collapse these banks? I don't know. We can spontaneously print all the money that we want. We inject that money into these banks, which they're already teetering. All we have to do is, once we insert it, to pop the balloon. And then they're ours. It's over with. I asked on live stream, I don't know if I told you this or not, I said, how many? I mean, this is a serious question. And I like to hear from you too. I do read every comment, even though it takes a long time sometimes, but I love reading them. How many people are teetering on, because we know food prices are going to continue to rise. How many of you are like teetering on the edge? I know I've had a lot of people say, I'm working twice as hard to make half as much. Okay, but you're still getting by. Not too well, but I got this house set on 76 degrees. I just got my electric bill and it was $150. I only live in one room of this house. That's completely ridiculous. Things are going to continue to rise. Home ownership has now become a laughable joke in Western society. It doesn't have to be. I've told you how to get around it by purchasing some raw land and an Amish-built cabin. $30,000. You could literally have 10, 20 acres and a decent home. I mean, you'll have to do additions to it and upgrades and stuff like that, but so what? Do it over time. You can't have everything all at once unless you're mega, mega rich. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. It's like, well, now I plopped it down. There's no water. There's no power. Look what I did. Plug and play solar. I could literally do that whole system setup now in about 3 hours. The entire electricity that powers my cabin, if I had all the components, it's like, here you go. It's 3 hours. Water and plumbing, that's a thing. I don't need to plumb a house. I only need a wet side, let's call it a wet room, which is where all the plumbing's at, your shower, your sink, your well, you only need one sink really, but 2 sinks, a bathroom sink and a kitchen sink. Well, that takes care of that. Heating and cooling. Heating is easy, $2,000 wood stove. I love a wood stove, man. It's just so relaxing. It really, really is. There are ways around this. People do not have to be subjects to an evil system that is trying to crush you like a bug under, big government's thumb. I'm completely against any form of ism, which is nothing other than a crazy word for totalitarianism. Doesn't matter what ism it is you can think of, it's just all totalitarianism in a different form or fashion. Have you thought about what you're going to do? It's not just about making a go bag and hoarding up non-perishable foods, which is important, but making a plan. I mean, what have you been busting your butt all these years for if the Fed is going to come along and... Because it's all about to crash. And there's only 2 ways out of this. There's not a third way. Only 2. Central bank digital currency and war. Take your pick. Evil, super evil number 1 or super evil number 2. It's going to be one or the other and possibly a mix of both. There is no other way out of this. Absolutely none. I wish that there was. I'd love to be wrong. I would much prefer to be wrong. I would love things to go back the way they were 4 years ago. I would love it. I'm pretty sure you would love it. People know that they could afford a home if they work hard and save their pennies, lead a normal life. Everybody wasn't, just absolutely crazy, which everybody is now, unfortunately. Anyway, tell me what you think. Please let me know on all this movement of military hardware, because a lot of you all at once have told me about the movement of military hardware. My email's in the description below. Have a good one.